What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. Today is another bit of a briefer episode, but we'll start out with recapping some of the great games that took place over this past weekend of college basketball. We'll talk a little bit about a new major injury that took place over the past week as well and what that means for that team moving forward. And then we'll end it with some of the best games to watch between today and Thursday's episode for this upcoming week of college basketball. So without further ado, let's get into it. This weekend of college hoops was absolutely loaded, and it started off on Friday night with Michigan State and Wisconsin. This was just not a good game, really, at any point, but Wisconsin really has probably the most impressive set of wins in the country. And in terms of looking at the top three wins on their resume, I really don't know if there's many teams that can compare to them in terms of their quality wins. But yeah, first they took down Michigan earlier on in the year. Then they took down Illinois last week. And then on Friday night, they took down Michigan State as well. So just, like I said, a really impressive set of wins there for Wisconsin. I think Boyd and Blackwell are really impressive. They were awesome on Friday night, but just a really sneaky backcourt that I think we haven't really talked about too much. I talked about them in my top 25 breakdown when I was discussing their game versus Michigan and think that they're just a very impressive backcourt. I don't necessarily think that they are rivaling for the best backcourt in America, but they can certainly compete with any backcourt in the nation. I thought that they were very impressive, but even aside from just them two, they shot 43% from deep as a team, which is just really impressive. And even on defense, they were really sound. They held Michigan State under 38% as a team from the field, which is just really impressive for a Michigan State team that typically likes to move the ball around and does like to drive and attack the rim. So holding them to under 38%, I thought was extremely impressive and just an all-around great game from Wisconsin as well. Like I said, they really like to play up down to their competition, but they also really like to play up to their competition as well. They dropped some really ugly games early on in the year, but now they're really starting to trend up and pretty much have secured an at-large bid. I think with their resume right now and their quality wins, I think they certainly deserve a spot in March Madness as of right now. As for Michigan State, aside from the Illinois game last week, they just really have not been playing well recently. I thought Cohen Carr looked really good on Friday night. He had a really efficient night, which is not really typical for him. He's obviously much more of an athlete than he is a scorer, but I thought he had a really impressive night on Friday night and just was really efficient with the ball. But other than him, they did not get any production from anywhere else. Michigan State has three tough matchups here in a row. They get UCLA and Ohio State, who are two not as good teams, definitely winnable games for them, but certainly not ones that they can overlook. And then they end the month with Purdue. So just a really tough stretch of games coming up here. I think they at least need to get 2 wins there to get back on track, but they really could use all three of them because as the Big Ten gets to the end of the year here, seeding is going to start to get a lot tighter. And I just think that Michigan State really could use 3 wins in a row here to try and bolster their resume a little bit before the end of the year. Wisconsin, in comparison, has a little bit of a lighter schedule coming up, but they also need to keep moving and keep their momentum going as well. If they want a chance to potentially crack the 5 seed line, which I do think they have a chance to do, they're going to need to rattle off some more wins here in conference play. Staying on Friday night, I had pointed out that Miami, Ohio, and Ohio game. This game pretty much went exactly how I thought it would go. Ohio did jump out to an early lead here in this one, but that was because they had the ball first. They led for about 10 seconds total in this game. They took the lead at 2-0, and from there on, it was all Miami, Ohio, and they just blew them off the court. Every time I watch this Red Hawks team, they just impress me. I just really think that they're starting to play much better ball than they were in the beginning of the year, where they were sort of struggling against some of these weaker teams and now starting to blow them out. But yeah, every time I watch them, they are just really impressive. Yet another game where they had at least 5 players put up double digits. They just really buy into team basketball, it seems, and look for the best shot. I think that is something that mid-majors need to do, especially when they don't have the talent that some of these top teams do. If they want to make a run in March, they have to have multiple guys on the court that can score, and that's exactly what this Red Hawks team has. They shoot the ball very well from deep. The only problem that I can really see with this Red Hawks team and potentially their downfall in March is their lack of rim protection. They just really do not have much size at all and definitely do not have a true rim protector. The two big men that they really seem to play majority of the minutes at least are 6'8" and 6'9", which is just very undersized, especially when you start talking about teams like Duke and Michigan and Arizona. So I do think that they are definitely an undersized team. However, I think that is something that can work in March Madness, especially like I said, they're a very good shooting team. They shoot 40% from deep as a team. That does typically seem to be the upset recipe in March. If you have a smaller team, you need to be able to light it up from deep. And if you can catch fire, you can beat anybody in March Madness. I truly do believe that. But they seem like a team that is perfectly built to upset someone. They're just a really scrappy team. They move the ball well. They buy into team defense and team offense. They look for the best shot, and they shoot an incredible clip from deep. I think that this is just a really solid team and a team that I think will at least win a game in March. And I think some of the disrespect will start to be getting removed from them here shortly as we get towards March Madness. But yeah, this is going to be one of my favorite teams to look at for an upset in March Madness in the first round. Moving on to Saturday, I had pointed out the Duke and Clemson game. Luckily, though, Duke was not without Pat Gungba in this one. It looked like they were going to be, at least based on Shire's postgame interview against Pitt. Maybe I overreacted to what he had said in that interview, but yeah, they were obviously able to get Gungba back for this one, which was huge. Losing him for an extended period of time would have been very hard for Duke to navigate the ACC, and specifically this Michigan matchup coming up this weekend on Saturday. So I think it was huge for them to get him back for this one. This game, however, was never really close at any point, and I think that the final score does not reflect how this game actually went. Duke just ran Clemson off the floor pretty much the entire night, and I think made a lot of people question who the actual second best team in the ACC is right now. As of right now, I don't really know who the best or the second best team is in the ACC. The best team in the ACC is clearly Duke, but after that, I think there's certainly arguments you could make for each team. I think they're all really good, but none really just stand out against the others. I think all of them have their issues, like I said. If I had to give one, I think I would stick with Louisville. I've been saying them pretty much all year as the best or second best team in the ACC, but I certainly think that that's very arguable, especially based on how the past couple of weeks have went for all of these teams. Overall, I thought this was a really impressive game for the Boozer, who is not really being talked about right now, and that is Caden Boozer. He really fell into his role as the point guard here and just kind of showed why people liked him as a point guard prospect. He has a really good feel for the game and just really controls the tempo and is obviously a winner. I mean, he just does what you need to win. He does the little things. He has no problem with diving on the floor for a loose ball. I just really like his game, and it's going to be really fun to see him develop as a Duke fan over his next couple years here. I expect him to at least be back for another year at Duke and potentially another 2 years. I could see him taking that kind of Trey Jones route where he just continues to get better and just becomes a leader in his junior year at Duke before he leaves for the NBA. But yeah, just a really impressive game from him, and wanted to tip my cap to a really impressive game from him, since most people are talking about his brother, but I think he deserves some love for that performance on Saturday. For Clemson, this was just a really disappointing showing. They were being talked about as the second best team in the ACC, but they just did not look competitive and blew a real chance at tying the ACC lead up here. They're still a good team, but yeah, I don't think that they're the second best team in the ACC. I think they're probably more around 4 or 5, but yeah, they definitely are going to need to bounce back here in the next coming weeks. For Duke, this was just another really impressive defensive performance. I think that a lot of people are not really harping on how good they are on defense. Their defense is going to take them very far in March, and I think if their defense shows up every night, they are going to be a tough out against anyone. Obviously, they have a really tough week upcoming. They have Syracuse coming up tomorrow, but then they have a really big one on Saturday against Michigan. However, they cannot afford to drop one against Syracuse. They really need to focus on that one before focusing their attention on Michigan. Moving on to probably the biggest blowout of the day that I had pointed out on Saturday's schedule was the Kansas and Iowa State game. This is definitely not what I was expecting and certainly not what I provided in my preview for this game. But yeah, Kansas had been playing like one of the best teams in the nation here, but the Cyclones just ran them off the floor the entire second half. Peterson did end up playing the full game in this one, and he just had a really rough game. He finished with only 10 points on 10 shots, shooting 30% from the field. Just a really, really bad game from him, and just a really impressive win for Iowa State there, taking down a very good Kansas team who had been playing as good as anyone as of recently. As of right now, I think it really seems like the Big 12 is the best conference in the nation, and I really believe that they could have 4 teams in the Elite Eight. I just really think that they have a lot of very good teams in that conference, and clearly the best conference in the nation to watch right now. Iowa State coming up has 3 really tough matchups, which just seems to be the Big 12 shtick here. They get Houston, Texas Tech, and BYU to end the month, which is just an insane stretch to end February here. And then Kansas also gets 2 lighter opponents before taking on Houston and Arizona to end the month as well. So just another really big set of games for both of these teams coming up here. Definitely going to keep tabs on them, and we'll most likely be watching each of those games as well. But yeah, it's going to be really fun to watch how the Big 12 continues to shape up here towards the end of the year. This conference is just super fun and super elite this year. Moving on to an SEC matchup that I had pointed out. I had pointed out Florida and Kentucky, and man, this Florida team has just been lights out and did not slow down yesterday at all. 0 lead changes all game set Florida up for a pretty dominant win and comfortable win that never really felt close at all. Xavier Lee was a player that everybody was really hype about transferring to Florida. Everybody was really high on him coming from Princeton, and he had a really, really rough start to the year after transferring. But recently, he has been playing much better and had a really good game yesterday. If they can get him and Boogie Fland playing at a high level by the end of the year, they are going to be extremely tough to beat for anyone. I mean, this team is just super elite and really fun to watch. They have a trio of big men that I have been talking about nonstop all year that are just really tough to game plan for. It's hard to tell what Golden is going to do with those 3 on a nightly basis. And then they have 2 very good guards in Fland and Lee. So just a very solid put together team that I think is going to probably get back to the Elite Eight at the very least. And I think that they have another Final Four run in them as well. I said on Thursday that Kentucky needed a big game from Oweh, and he just did not give them one. He shot 4 of 14 from the field and 0 of 3 from deep. Just a really bad and inefficient night from him. I thought Aberdeen played pretty well against his former team, but it certainly wasn't enough for them to come away with the win here. Kentucky is playing much better recently, even with their injuries here. I think that they are definitely starting to trend back up. But I just don't know how far they're going to go without a full roster. I do think that they'll certainly win a game in March, but as far as that, I think that they'll probably bounce out in the round of 32. But in the meantime, they need to bounce back here this week with 2 very winnable games and need to get back in the win column to bolster their resume and start trending back up as we get closer to March here. Moving on to probably the best game of the weekend, and that was Texas Tech and Arizona. And this was just an awesome game, just absolutely electric from the start to finish, and exactly why the Big 12 is the best conference this year. There are just heavyweights matching up against each other on nearly a nightly basis in this conference. After being clearly the best team in the nation, Arizona has really started to skid here, dropping 2 in a row. Now, both of these games they dropped were to some really good teams and elite teams, in my opinion, so not necessarily something to hang your head over, but definitely at least a little bit of a skid after being the most impressive team in the nation for the first 3 months of the season here. The most impressive player in this game to me, I believe, was Christian Anderson. He was just absolutely incredible all night, and he just really looked like he had complete control over the game for the entire time. I thought that Toppin was also really, really good, especially in the second half and overtime. I think that he is just an extremely impressive player and just not getting nearly enough love for how much success and what he is doing in college this year. He has been as good as anybody, in my opinion, and his NBA talent appeal might not be there, but in college basketball, he is an awesome player. On the other hand, Pete has really struggled heavily here. Back to back games where he gets a chance to prove his dominance and go up against another very good big in the nation and just comes up way, way short. He had a really good game against Florida in the beginning of the year, but I have to be honest, if that game took place again now, I think he would struggle a lot. I do not think that he would have nearly the success that he had the first go around, and I really have tempered my expectations on him a bit. I do think he's still a very good player, don't get me wrong, but I just think that there's a lot of red flags that have been showing up recently in these top matchups here, and just some things that I'm seeing that I don't really like. Another thing that I keep seeing people aren't very happy with is McCasland and what he did to Anderson at the end of regular time. Anderson got a switch onto a big man, which is exactly what they were looking for, but then he decided to drive and take him into the low block, picked up his dribble, and then ended up putting up a really ugly shot at the end of the game. I did not think it was the right choice either. I personally thought that McCaslin should have called a timeout and drawn up a play, but it looked like he wanted to give his best player a chance to make a play at the end of the game, so I'm not going to fault him for that. However, I do think it was weird how people reacted to him kind of ripping Anderson apart for that decision. I don't think that that was necessarily putting him on blast or trying to disrespect him. I think it was just a teaching moment. I mean, for a guard like Anderson, if you get a big man like that switched onto you, that should be easy cooking every time. That should be an easy step back mid range or a jump shot every single time, unless you can get him in the air and get around him to the rim. I really didn't like what he did there. He drove in, picked up his dribble, and sat on the block, which is just not going to be an area of success for a guard against a big man. And then he didn't pass the ball and just kind of chucked up a dumb shot. So I thought it was a really good teaching moment, and I thought McCasland actually taught it very well. You could see clearly on his lips what he was saying. He asked why he took the big man into the block. He asked him that multiple times. I thought it was actually a really good moment and a really cool moment to see coaching in live time. And then after the game, he of course praised Anderson in the press conference and talked about how awesome he was all night. So again, I think that this was actually a really cool teaching moment. I don't necessarily see any problems with this, and I think that it'll make Anderson a better player in the long run, in my opinion. However, moving forward, this really can be applied to every single Big 12 team, it seems like at this point, but both of these teams have some really tough in-conference games coming up here and are going to need to continue to build their resumes as we get closer towards March if they want to increase their seed line. Up next, I had Arkansas and Auburn. You could really tell what Steve Pearl wanted to do in this one, and that was to avoid getting into a running match with the Razorbacks. They really did slow down the first half and really tried to get into their half-court offense, but they just weren't efficient enough to keep up with Arkansas. Other than that, in the second half, it kind of blew open a little bit. Arkansas was finally able to play at a pace that they liked and pretty much dominated the entire second half. It really didn't seem like Auburn was going to threaten Arkansas for the lead really at any point throughout the game. I thought it was a really awesome game from both backcourts, specifically Acuff and Richmond. I thought that they absolutely dominated all night and showed why Arkansas has one of the best backcourts in the nation, if not the best backcourt in the nation. But aside from that, I thought Keyshawn Johnson and Pettiford were really impressive as well. They just didn't get enough from anyone else to have a chance to pull this one off, unfortunately. Arkansas, though, is another team in the SEC that I think could absolutely be dangerous come March Madness. I don't think that they're as good as Florida, but I think they can certainly beat them, and they'll have an opportunity to prove that here at the end of the month. In the meantime, they should go 3-0 until then. They get Bama, Missouri, and Texas A&M before taking on the Gators at the end of the month. Auburn, on the other hand, is probably right on the cusp of making the tournament. I would say that they're probably one of the first teams out right now, but they have a pretty lackluster schedule coming up aside from Kentucky, so they will really need to rattle off a couple wins here, and honestly are going to need to pull that one off in Kentucky to boost their resume and get them more in the tournament field as well. The last game that I had pointed out on Thursday's episode for this weekend was that Gonzaga and Santa Clara game. Even though Gonzaga pulled this one off at the end, I thought it was just a really impressive showing for Santa Clara. They really kept this game close the entire time, and they're just a really unselfish team that really seems to look like for the best shot on every possession, with a heavy dose of threes mixed in there as well. I was really impressed by what they have and do think that they are a legit team that could make a run in March depending on where they are seated. The game itself was just a really high-paced and high-scoring game. Both teams took over 60 shots, setting us up for a 180-point game. So that was just a really fun game to watch in terms of offensive fireworks. Gonzaga was really impressive as well. They had 4 dudes with 15+, which was just really impressive as a team. They also took back the lead of the West Coast Conference as well with this win. So, like I said, Gonzaga is very good once again. They are still coached by Mark Few, which just seems is going to be a consistent theme as long as he is at the helm there. But after a really rough loss against Portland last week, they really bounced back here and got exactly what they needed to take back the lead of the West Coast Conference here. So look at them to kind of dominate this conference probably for the remainder of the year, but definitely do not sleep on St. Mary's and Santa Clara. They are absolutely very good teams, and both will most likely make the tournament at large as well. Up next, I did briefly want to touch on a huge injury that took place last week and kind of made me a little sick to my stomach, but that was to Caleb Wilson. Unfortunately, he did come down with a pretty significant injury last week. It seems like he fractured his hand and is expected to miss a decent amount of time. For the Tar Heels, this is obviously a huge blow. There's not really any other way you can word that. After his stellar performance of Duke, I really think that he put a lot of people on notice and showed why he deserves to be in the conversation for the best freshman in the nation. But this injury is just really disappointing, even for me as a Duke fan. I will always root against UNC. I definitely want them to lose every single game, but I definitely won't root for injuries. I definitely want to see them at their full strength, especially when we have another matchup coming against them here in a month here. So when I said what I said about the Duke and UNC matchup coming up, I was fully expecting Wilson to play, obviously. As a fan of basketball, I always want to see each team at their full strength. Unfortunately, we might not get that rematch now, so that's just really disappointing for me. I really wanted to be able to get another look at them against us with their full team. Obviously, that's going to be a little bit of an excuse that he is not going to play in that one, so definitely a little sour as a Duke fan on that one, but of course, I'm praying for a speedy recovery for him. I hope nothing but the best for him and think he's going to have a long and very successful career. But he is an incredible talent, and I would love to see him play in a college basketball uniform as much as I can. I do think, however, this might actually help their seeding a bit here, just because I think it would be pretty wrong to judge them harshly without him in this time frame. He is clearly their best player and one of the best players in the nation when he's healthy, so I think that they're still a very good team, and without him, they're going to definitely take a major step back here. Losing a couple games without him, I do not think should be the end of the world and should not put too much harm on their resume, in my opinion. I think that they have shown that they are a very good team with him in their lineup, and the committee should take that into account with their seeding. If they end up in a 7 or 8 slot like they did that one year, that is just going to be really unfortunate for whatever team has to play them in the second round, because I really do think that they deserve to be around the 5 or 6 or 4 seed line. Playing them in the second round would just not be fun for many teams here, and it will be interesting to see how they navigate this time frame without Wilson, but I fully expect them to struggle at least a little bit here, and most likely will take some pretty significant steps backward and will lose some games that they shouldn't lose, but again, that's going to be mostly due to them missing their best player and their engine on offense. Of course, I did want to provide you guys with some of the games to watch between now and Thursday's episode. That'll start off tomorrow night with Duke and Syracuse. This is another game that should not be competitive, but of course, I have to watch my boys play. The Orange just got a really huge win on Saturday and was a much-needed win against a good SMU team. However, they are still firmly outside the tournament, in my opinion. This should just be another convincing Duke win. Syracuse just does not have the firepower to keep up with this Duke team. If it was at Syracuse, I'd like their chances a little bit more, but not much more. If they want to win this game, they are going to need Freeman to play lights out against Cam Boozer, which I just do not see happening. Cam Boozer is the best player in the country right now. Even though he hasn't been playing as great as of recently, he has still been filling up the stat sheet and proving why he is the best player in the country even on his off nights. But Duke really needs to avoid a slip up here, as I mentioned earlier. They got a huge game coming up this weekend against Michigan, but they cannot afford to turn their eyes to Michigan too early here and drop a really rough game to Syracuse. So definitely need to take care of business on Monday night and then focus our attention towards Michigan on Saturday. Staying on Monday night, we have another absolutely loaded matchup in Houston and Iowa State. This conference is just so much fun. Like I said on Thursday's episode and today's episode, actually, it seems like we're just getting an insane matchup on a nightly basis here in the Big 12. Both of these teams are playing as good as anyone right now, and in my opinion, are two of the best teams in the nation. Both of them are slotted around the 1 and 2 seed lines right now, so this game is going to have huge implications on March Madness seeding here down the road. Houston is going to need a huge game from Flemings if they're going to want to pull this one off. I saw yesterday that Kelvin Sampson had some comments about Fleming and how he did not have nearly as good of a game as we are used to seeing out of him, but I think that this is a perfect opportunity for him to have a great game and bounce back here. If Houston's going to want to pull this one off, they're going to need him to have a great game as well. For the Cyclones, though, they're going to need another big game from Momcilovic. I think he had an awesome game. He's probably the best shooter in the nation right now, but also Joshua Jefferson is going to need to show up for Iowa State as well. I think if those two can have a good game for Iowa State, they should be able to pull this one off, but that Houston defense is extremely tough, and I fully expect them to make both of them very uncomfortable all night. So I'm really looking forward to a really high-level matchup here. I think Iowa State is going to want to push the pace, but Houston obviously is going to want to slow the game down and grind it out on defense. So it's going to be a really fun one to see how these teams kind of go opposite of each other, but I think it'll set us up for a really high-level game here. Up next, I have Purdue and Michigan. This is the other conference that I've been talking really highly of recently, and I do think that they are the second best conference in the nation. But yeah, this conference also just continues to bless us with awesome matchups on nearly a nightly basis as well. Purdue has been a team that had been sliding recently, but got back on track here in the last week and a half. They just blew out Iowa after they struggled against them pretty heavily in the beginning of the year, so I thought that was a really impressive turnaround for them. But now they get a team who will probably be the number one team in the country. I think they definitely will be the number one team in the country, actually, in Michigan. This is just going to be another huge test for the Boilermakers. They have some very big wins recently, but they would really be trumped by this one if they can pull this one off. I think this would be their most impressive win on the year. But Michigan is the best team in the country right now. I don't really know if that's very arguable. Until this weekend, Arizona was, but now it really looks like Michigan has started to pull away in that aspect. I like Michigan's chances here to get a win on the road, but Purdue is certainly going to put up a fight here. I'm really hoping for a really competitive game here. Not sure if that's what we'll get, but I'm hoping that Purdue can at least keep this one competitive, and I do like their chances to potentially pull off an upset here, but I think Michigan continues their dominance here and then looks towards Saturday for Duke. Staying in the Big Ten, I have Nebraska and Iowa circled here. I really think that this is going to be a pretty good matchup as well. Nebraska has struggled a lot here recently and needs this one very desperately, but Iowa is certainly no pushover, and they are certainly going to be hungry after getting run off the court by Purdue. If Iowa's going to have a chance to pull this one off, Bennett Sturts is going to have to go off. I think he is going to have to play outside of his mind for Iowa to have a chance to pull this one off. They just do not have nearly enough talent to keep up with this Nebraska team aside from Sturts. But if he can get hot, I think Iowa can absolutely get an upset here. However, I really don't expect them to. I think the Cornhuskers should win this game fairly easily and need to kind of remove some of the doubts that have been placed on them since their recent skid here. Like I said, though, the Big Ten and the Big 12 just has incredible matchups on a nearly a nightly basis. So we're going to continue to keep checking in on both of these conferences as we get towards the end of the year here. But yeah, I like the Cornhuskers' chance to pull this one off, but I definitely think the Hawkeyes have a chance to pull off an upset here as well. Another game that I have circled here is that Arkansas and Alabama game on Wednesday night. Now that Bediako is officially out for Bama for the rest of the year, I did want to get another look at them against a tougher opponent and think that this is a pretty good opportunity to see that. Arkansas is probably the second or third best team in the SEC right now, and their backcourt has been playing incredible and rivals any backcourt in the nation, in my opinion. Without Bediako, I think the Tide's defense has taken a big downturn here. With him, their defense was much better, but yeah, without him, they just lose a lot of defensive production. If they want to win this one, they are going to need to have a much better game defensively, and I think they need to match Arkansas's pace. Arkansas loves to play fast, but not many teams, if any, can play faster than the Tide. So I think that type of pace will favor the Tide in this one. I think if they want to win this one, they got to win it in a shootout. With Falone and Holloway, I think that they can definitely do so, but they're really going to need to have that guard tandem play better than the Razorbacks backcourt if they want a chance to pull this one off. The last game that I have circled on the schedule here between now and Thursday's episode is the BYU and Arizona game. I know, it's very shocking that I have another Big 12 matchup here circled, but like I said, this is just going to be pretty much a nightly thing here in the Big 12. Both of these teams have kind of slid here a little bit recently. BYU has definitely dropped some games that were much uglier than the Arizona losses, but I think Arizona's freshman, Koa Pete, has been the one struggling the most out of anybody, and even in comparison to the teams. Even in BYU's losses, Dabansa has still looked like one of the best players in the country and has still been playing very well as of recently, so I don't think that he has necessarily started to slide. I just think BYU as a total has started to slide here. But Pete, on the other hand, has been awful in these past two games, and that even might be putting it a little bit lightly. He has 8 points total in the past two games, shooting 2 of 11 from the field, and half of his points came from the free throw line. Even last night, he did not take a single field goal attempt. He obviously got to the free throw line 4 times, but yeah, he did not take a single field goal attempt the entire night, which is just really, really disappointing for a guy of his caliber and someone who's being projected as a lottery pick. That was just a really, really ugly night for him and a really bad stretch for him in general here. Personally, I'm going to be focusing on him in this one. I think that this is a really good opportunity for him to get back on track. I definitely don't think that Keita is a scrub and is certainly not a pushover, but should not be someone that Pete struggles against here. They will definitely need him to get back to the level that he was playing at in the beginning of the year, like he was against Florida, if they want a chance to cut down the nets in April. And I think that is certainly something he is more than capable of. I just think that he's kind of hit a little bit of a freshman wall here. But I'll be looking forward to seeing how he can bounce back in this one versus BYU. And hoping for a competitive game here, but I fully expect Arizona to get back in the win column here and in a pretty convincing fashion. But that is all for today's episode of the CBB Yapper. I appreciate everyone who decided to tune in to today's episode. And if you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and join us back on Sundays and Thursdays for new episodes.